as promised, we're so pleased to be joined now by Brendan Marks, college basketball writer from The Athletic. We'll talk some hoops here for the next segment. Brendan, thanks for coming on. How are you today?
Absolutely. Happy to come on. Thanks for having me, guys. All good here.
All right, so let's jump in with the ACC. And there's been a narrative around the conference the last several years that ACC basketball is down. We've seen that reflected with the selection committee only giving 4 or 5 bids to the ACC conference the last handful of years. How would you compare the start of this season for the ACC to the previous years? Do you think they're trending in the right direction?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think you could really argue that this hasn't been a significant improvement for the ACC. Right now, as of right after the ACC-SEC challenge, the ACC had 8 teams in the top 50 of the net, which, they would have killed for last year. So the fact of the matter is, rather than being so top-heavy as we saw last year, where effectively Duke was the only team on anybody's schedule who was really going to move the needle one way or another, you have a number of teams who are in that regard this year. Duke's obviously there again. Louisville is there. North Carolina, Virginia. You have other teams who I think give the league just a little bit more balance when you're looking at the overall schedule. There is still some, for lack of a better term, there's still some anchors at the bottom. But I think when you look at the league from probably 1 through 10, it is significantly more competitive than it was a year ago. And I would be very surprised if the league doesn't get at least 5, if not 6, maybe even 7 teams into the big dance.
All right, so that's where I was going next is, how do you think this will translate come March? And for Syracuse fans, we're looking at it as, I don't know if SU is good enough to crack that top group of, North Carolina, Duke, Louisville. But, I think collectively around here, we think they're good enough to maybe be in that 5, 6, 7 range. So do you think it's realistic that Syracuse could get one of those, one of those bids if the committee, hands out a half a dozen, let's say?
I do, absolutely. And, back in the preseason when I did our ACC rankings before anybody even played a game, I put Syracuse 6 in the conference. I think that level of talent there, you look with Donnie Freeman, J.J. Starling, I know they've both been injured to some extent. Nate George coming in. I was really encouraged and optimistic about the talent, and obviously to have really done 2 things so far this year that Syracuse had not done so far in Red Autry's tenure. Number one, you haven't, at least yet, lost one of those games that is really inexcusable and kind of tanks your non-conference resume before you get started. So, there's still a couple more of those on the schedule. You got to take care of the likes of the Hofstra. You've got to take care of the likes of the St. Joe's. But if you do that, then you look at this non-conference schedule, and you do have the other part of the piece, which is you have a marquee win. You have Tennessee at home. That's a clear NCAA tournament team. None of your losses to Houston, Kansas, and Iowa State, all on neutrals. Those are all, for lack of a better term, they're good losses. And so, when you look at Syracuse's league schedule, they're going to have 8 or 9 opportunities, for sort of those marquee wins. They probably need to win at least 2 or 3 of them to put themselves in the conversation. But again, health willing, I think that this is absolutely a year that Syracuse can be back in the NCAA tournament. It more than has the talent.
After all these preseason tournaments are over, who's the one team that surprised you the most so far out of the ACC?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll say this. I think Duke is better than I thought they would be, and I expected them to win the league and to be in the running for a number 1 seed. I did not expect Cameron Boozer to be the all-world player he is already. I think you can make the argument that he has been, I would make the argument he's been the most impactful singular player in the country. He is willing Duke to wins, and he's doing things, quite frankly, that Cooper Flagg didn't throughout the entirety of last year, which would have been unthinkable to say a couple of months ago. Virginia I thought would be good. They've probably been a little bit better than I thought. Clemson has been better, I thought. Miami being able to pick up a nice win in the ACC-SEC challenge against Ole Miss. I think they're sort of in that same mix as Syracuse being on the bubble. Even Wake Forest, I think, has been feistier than I thought they'd be. Obviously almost picked up a huge win against Michigan earlier in the year and weren't able to, but again, those are the sorts of teams that we're talking about. They're not dead weight. They're going to be in the mix. So of all of those, I would probably say Virginia is the one that surprised me the most. I thought this would be a borderline top 25 tournament team, and 8-1, a top 15 offense nationally, a couple of really nice wins already this year. I've been encouraged by what Ryan Noden's got going.
What about going in the opposite direction? Would you say NC State's probably the most disappointing, or is there someone else that you would think of?
Yeah, they've got to be up there, unfortunately. And look, I thought that NC State had the potential to be a top 25 team, and their defense has been it's defenseless. It's toothless right now. I figured you and I could probably go out and run a pick and roll and score against NC State at this point. It's been really ugly for the Wolfpack. I do think it'll get better. I think that Will Wade is not going to tolerate that sort of lackluster effort on that end of the floor. Other than NC State, who I still think can rebound and be a tournament team, the other one that kind of stands out to me who's been worse than I thought was Georgia Tech. I thought there were some nice pieces there at least. You've got Bay and Dongo back. You've got Mo Silla coming in. He's a top 50 freshman. Kawasi Reeves is a nice proven player, and they've just had the floor fall out. Haven't looked competitive in a lot of these games against other high majors. Don't really have any leg to stand on in the non-conference. It's been worse than I thought it would be for Damon Stoudemire's team.
I do want to get back to Syracuse for a moment, Brendan, if we could. And, you kind of laid out and you said in the preseason that you had them sixth in the conference, and you were talking about Donnie and JJ, and they've both missed time, as you pointed to. Nate George has been good against the lesser competition, but has struggled a little bit with turnovers against the better competition. With all that being said, with those three players maybe not quite living up to the hype at the moment because of injuries and whatnot, what has opened your eyes about this Syracuse team to this point? What have you liked about Syracuse to this point in the season, as they knocked off Tennessee and they kind of have themselves in the mix right now?
Yeah, well, I think, sort of broadly, it's the depth on this team. Yeah. And kind of speaking to the point of what you're talking about, this is not a team that has been particularly deep in years past. And so the fact that you do have guys who can contribute off the bench, you have, Anthony's able to come off the bench. You have Tyler Betsy, obviously, has had some really impactful games. That to me is something that Syracuse, when I think of Syracuse, that's what I think of. I think of them being 8-9 deep and having these guys, and this is sort of a return to that. The other thing I would say is the front court's been a lot better than I thought it would be. It's been a lot more effective. I think William Kyle has been significantly better than I thought he would be. He's been, a legitimate high major starter. And then when you throw in, obviously, you're getting the occasional contributions from Betsy. I have been pleasantly surprised by what I thought was going to be the biggest weakness on this team. Again, we'll see what it continues to look like as these pieces get healthy and sort of fall into more of a routine together. But, if you're a Syracuse fan right now, this has got to have been the most encouraging non-conference that you've had in, 4 or 5 years at the least?
Definitely. At least, yes.
At least. So I would feel good about where they are right now. And, again, if you can get Donnie and JJ and some of these guys back and on the same page and healthy, there's no reason to me still that Syracuse can't finish as a top 6 team in the league.
Yeah, I want to follow up on Donnie. So he's missed the last 4 games, the 4 most important games of the non-conference so far, and we don't know exactly when he's coming back. It sounds like he's trending in the right direction. They may get him back sooner rather than later, but he hasn't played during this stretch, the 3 Vegas games and then the Tennessee game. I realize it's tough to speculate on how the committee will handle that, but I wanted to get your thoughts because we've heard differing opinions on this over the years about, yes, the committee does take that into account. No, the committee, won't take that into account because it was so long ago. How do you think the committee would take something like that into account, that, the team's best player missed the entire Vegas trip? They went 0-3. They were competitive, but they didn't get a win. How does the committee take something like that into consideration? Will they take it into consideration?
Yeah, the 2 things I would say. Number one, I think just objectively, without even considering the fact that Donnie wasn't playing in those 3 games in Vegas, none of those are bad losses, right? Like losing to Houston, Kansas, and Iowa State, who are all top 17 teams on KenPom right now, on neutral courts. Like, those are defensible losses for any team in the country. So you're starting off on a strong leg there. 2, as far as how the committee is going to look at it, in my experience, talking to committee members, when players tend to miss a chunk of games, as Donnie now has, and you look at Syracuse's schedule, it's relatively light the rest of December. It's not a situation where, you've got 3 more top 15 games the rest of the month. Like, it's not a situation where you need to rush him back, especially big men and lower body injuries. You can afford to sort of take your time, given the schedule. But if he ends up missing, 5, 6, 7 games, in my experience, the committee has looked at that, I think, more favorably in terms of considering it than they would if somebody misses 1 game for a sickness, or if they miss 1 game because they sprained an ankle. Those usually don't, those sorts of, temporary injuries don't usually get a ton of credence. But when you have somebody who is as impactful as he has been and will continue to be, and they've been out for an extended stretch of time, especially if you don't have any truly detrimental results, what Syracuse doesn't right now, usually the committee does take that into account in a way that benefits your case.
Last Syracuse question. In terms of what the target is, for this team to make it into the NCAA tournament, you think top 6 and they should be safe in order to get in? Is that kind of what you're projecting?
Yeah, for me, the top 4 are kind of spoken for.
Yeah.
I think Duke and Louisville. Duke, I think, is in a tier of its own. I'd probably put Louisville a half peg behind that, and then North Carolina and Virginia, I think, are right there too. Like that top 4 feels pretty safe to me. So then you're jockeying with the likes of a Clemson, a Miami, an NC State, an SMU. Those next 5 teams to me, I think the ACC is in a situation this year where it can conceivably get. I would be surprised if it was only 5. So I think if you can make it to the top 6, and it's, as you guys know, it is not just about the quantity of games, about which games you win.
Yeah.
So you're looking at the schedule and you're looking at, okay, who are the ones that are going to move the needle? It's going to be the North Carolinas, the Virginias, the Dukes, the Louisvilles. The good thing for Syracuse is that they have a couple of those down the stretch. I think they've got Duke, Carolina, and Louisville all in their last 5 or 6 games.
It's basically the whole month of February, to be honest with you, Brendan. It's every game's big in February.
That's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing because that's when you will have a better idea of the ones that you need to actually fill up your resume. So I don't know that top 6 guarantees you getting in. Just like I would say this, if Syracuse finishes 8th, but they have, wins over Duke and Louisville, you put that together with Tennessee, and that's a pretty strong case as long as you don't have any glaring losses. So Syracuse is going to be in that mix. I think staying in that mix the whole time is crucial. I don't know that just being 6th guarantees you anything. It's more about making sure you're getting those quality wins. They can't afford to drop any of the lackluster ones the rest of this month. And then once conference play starts, you've got to tick off a North Carolina, a Virginia, a Duke somewhere along the line to strengthen the non-conference resume.
I've got 2 more for you outside the ACC. Let's go to the Big East next. And I think we saw, this conference initially get a big boost from revenue sharing. But they see, at least early on, it's very early. It's only early to mid-December. But it seems like the Big East might be a little bit down this year compared to where they were last year. What do you make of the Big East?
Yeah, well, I would 100% agree with that assessment. Right now, just in strength of conference by overall net rating of teams, the Big East is 5th right now. It's last amongst the major conferences. To me, it's a 2-bid league, right? I think a 3rd team probably will get in, whether it's Seton Hall, which has been surprisingly good. Maybe Villanova can pick up a marquee win. They've got Michigan tonight, I think. But you look at the league top to bottom, the bottom is bad, and the middle doesn't really have anything to stand on. It's UConn and it's St. John's, and then it's Travolta looking around wondering where everybody else is. So to me, I think you look at the revenue sharing piece of it. It's something that teams have talked about, giving the Big East an advantage, giving the A-10 an advantage, these non-football leagues. And that's true, but at the same time, that doesn't guarantee you anything. Just like we've seen with the SEC in football, just because you spend a lot of money doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily win. And I think the money, especially outside of those top 2, is not necessarily quite as dramatic as people think. I would say a mid-tier ACC team, somebody like a Syracuse, somebody like a Wake Forest, they're probably spending as much, if not more, than a mid-Big East team because they don't have that football revenue either to get to the cap of $20.5 million. So I've been underwhelmed by the Big East this year. I thought Marquette would be better than it's been. I thought Creighton would be better than it's been. It does not seem like it's going to be a great year for the league. I do think it'll ultimately probably get a 3rd team in, but for all intents and purposes, it's a 2-bid league in my eyes.
Last one for me, you look at the top of the poll right now, and you've got 4 unbeaten teams that have all scored very impressive wins at one point or another. Arizona, Michigan, Duke, Iowa State. Of those 4, who's impressed you the most, if you could pick one?
Yeah, it's a hard question. It's one I've been kind of grappling with as I'm getting ready to write my weekly column. I was out in Las Vegas, was able to see Syracuse out there. It is really hard to get the mental image of Michigan just throttling Gonzaga out of my head. I think Arizona winning at UConn, I think Duke winning at Michigan State, Iowa State winning at Purdue, those are all incredible wins. The beatdown that Michigan put on Gonzaga, which I think is a good team. I think Gonzaga is probably going to wind up being a top 10 team, maybe a 2 seed. That was something I have not seen in a very long time. And so for me, when Michigan is at its best and it's capable of doing that, I don't know that there's a team in the country that can beat them. I think your fear if you're a Michigan fan, is have we already played our best game of the year in November, which you obviously don't want to be doing. So I think Duke probably has the best resume altogether. They're the only team in the country that's got 4 ranked wins. But for me, if all things being equal, Michigan just has so many different ways that you can beat them, that they can beat you, and that Gonzaga game is going to be hard for me to forget for a long time.
Yeah, and the game before that, they beat Auburn by 30. Which is,
right, exactly. First team ever to have back-to-back ranked wins by 30 plus. I mean, that's got to count for something, right?
It's crazy. It really is crazy. Listen, Brendan, we're so glad to have you on today. Thank you for the time. We do appreciate it, and hopefully we can talk college basketball with you again as the season progresses. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and hopefully Syracuse keeps giving you guys good things to talk about.
Yeah, we would like that.
It would be nice.
We would like that. Brendan Marks from The Athletic.